Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for watching on YouTube, listening to us on iTunes or on Google Play, and downloaded now in 17 countries as well as around the United States. Appreciate that following. We have spoken many times on this show about one of the things, which is what we're trying to do, is bring you the guests that matter, that have input into the industry. We'll talk a little bit about the history, but also look ahead and talk about what's going on right now as far as horse racing. And one of the things we've talked about many times is for everybody that loves it and they want the horses to do well, and we all want that, sometimes horse racing needs to not just think outside the box, but create a whole new box. And one of the guys that's done that is Martin Panza, Senior Vice President of Racing Operations at the New York Racing Association. I think one of the most innovative guys in the business, and Martin is kind enough to join us now. And Martin, thanks for being on.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, when you were lured away from California and you were out there at Hollywood Park and Santa Anita and they bring you to New York, I mean, that was one of the things, right? This strategic leadership and your idea of big events like we just saw at the recent Travers Day. And that's kind of what horse racing needs in many ways, isn't it? Is a little bit of a, hey, why is this a big moment if you don't know the sport very well or you're a casual fan?
I think it is. When I came back to New York, obviously the New York Racing Association has a lot of resources, both from a purse standpoint and then from their racetracks being Saratoga and Belmont especially. And we've tried to develop the big days. We think that, it's very difficult anymore to fix a Wednesday or a Thursday. But we tried to say, look, we have limited marketing dollars, and let's try to create a big day in New York at least once every month, April through, say, December 1st, where we can get, maybe casual fans or new fans to say, you know what, this looks interesting. Let's go out to the track. And we hope that if they have a good time at that event, that maybe they say, hey, this was pretty fun coming to the racetrack. Let's come out and do this again. So we think it's the way to move forward. And so far in New York, it's been very positive for us.
And as you say, it creates that with any sport. If you were out there going to a Dodgers game, or now in this case, going to a Yankees or Mets game, you like that when a big team comes in, right? That's when they sell it out. They don't sell it out for the team in last place. They sell it out for the rivalry or a big division game.
No, exactly. It's the same premise. We try to give people a reason to come out. Hey, this horse is coming in from Japan, or Aidan O'Brien is sending horses in from Ireland, or hey, we've got the big California horse coming in, and there's 5 or 6 stakes races this weekend, and it's an event that you don't want to miss. And unfortunately, right now in racing, it's that's what it's going to take to get people to come out to the track. And like I said, we think it's the right way to move, and I think most of the country and even Canada has sort of moved that way.
And for you were one of the first to get in. I remember, like in California, the idea about the international fields. I mean, it's not new, but you really seem to embrace it more. Like you say, reaching out to like a great trainer like Aidan O'Brien, or a horse that's doing well from the Far East, and seeing that, again, that creates interest. Like we're seeing on the Kentucky Derby Trail now, where they're bringing in a horse qualifies automatically from Japan if they want to.
Right. I mean, racing is becoming very much international. The United States, because we have dirt racing, we've probably been a little bit slow adapting to that. But certainly as turf racing becomes more prominent in the States, you want to bring horses in from around the world. It makes it more interesting. And we get a chance to see how our horses stack up to foreign competition and vice versa. So I think it's the right thing to do. And it makes you, in the morning, you go to the track and you say, God, I can't wait to see this race today and see if we can beat the Japanese horse or the Aidan O'Brien horse. So I think it's the right way to go.
Talking with Martin Panza, Senior Vice President, Racing Operations, New York Racing Association. In the past, the creator of, among other things, the American Oaks, a great turf race for the 3-year-old fillies that, you kind of just know it now. But when you started like the American Oaks, I guess the people thought, really, you think this is going to work?
Right. Well, we were sitting at a Hollywood Park, and we were trying to find some race that would sort of give us a big event that nobody else was doing. And we looked around the country and frankly around the world, and we realized that sort of July weekend, we could create a race that would basically fit in the schedule and get big fields and be interesting. And it actually worked. And I ended up sort of bringing that same idea back to New York with me with their new Turf Triple Crown series.
Yeah, which is off to a good start.
Yeah, we're happy so far. It's the first year that we're doing it, and it's certainly a long-term project, but there was a need for it in American racing. And now if you look at a pattern of races for 3-year-olds on the turf in America, we've now got these longer races set up. And if we can get some mile races set up, Arlington Park was willing to make the Secretariat a mile. Now we create 2 divisions for turf horses in the 3-year-old category. And that's important that you have these patterns set up that allow trainers to develop horses and become our future stars, Breeders' Cup Day, or at people's big events down the road when they turn 4.
Martin, and obviously you're in, one of the key roles in a leadership position there with NYRA and obviously influencing the whole industry. I don't want to be critical of the industry because, it's been good to me. It was my entree to network TV was through horse racing. But, sometimes we have talked on this show about a bit of a reluctance. I think that would be a fair word to say about trying something new. Even with the success you've had with new things, do you still find at times that there's a little bit of, again, reluctance to say, well, we've never done this in the past and we're still having horse racing, so why do we need something new?
I think so at times, but we're sort of in a new world these days with everything that went on at Santa Anita this winter. And I think people are more willing to try new things. And when you look at the game really east of the Mississippi, there's probably never been a better time to be in it. I mean, purses at Oaklawn are going to be at all-time record highs. Purses in Kentucky are going to be at all-time record highs. Arlington Park just got announced that they have a casino coming. Monmouth Park just got a $10 million purse subsidy. Colonial Downs just reopened and are giving away $500,000 a day. You've got the NYRA tracks where our purses have never been better. So really, if you look at it, with purses, they've never been better on the East Coast and the Midwest. And then you throw in the tax advantages that people get. And, a lot of people, you can play this game 60 cents on the dollar. It's a time when I think at some point here we're going to start to see some growth because things really have never been better.
And you got like you say, it's kind of in some ways a paradox because you get, like you say, you've got more money now, and, with the race that's going to be in Saudi next year, all the big super days of racing that continue to seem to grow. But yet, like recently at Saratoga, you got a 3-horse race. I think it was a Chad Brown trifecta. And not just there, but in other major tracks, you're seeing smaller fields. Of course, there's less horses. I mean, the foal crop's half the size that it was 30 years ago. Is there any concern with that or any way to get more people to have more horses out there?
There is. So the foal crop has obviously gone, from say 45,000 down to around 20. And we probably have a little too much racing in the States, but it's a fine line because we also we're a job creator, and you have to choose that line of creating jobs for people and allowing horsemen to run and allowing them to keep those grooms and exercise riders in their barns and keeping those guys in business so that the business can keep going. At the same time, we've got some super trainers that have most of the horses in their barns, and between the foal crop and maybe some of the super trainers, we do run some small fields at times. However, if you go back, and I like to collect old programs, if you go back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were times when they were running 3, 4, 5 horse fields back then too. So I think that's probably for certain categories, it's going to happen. It's something we don't want to see happen, but there's probably a little bit too much racing still in the States.
Is a solution I don't know, would you reduce the card each day and hope to have bigger fields? I mean, is that even a thing to think about? That'd be like 1 or 2 less races to bet each day, but you'd have more competitive fields maybe. I'm sure it'd be a thrill for whoever's the racing secretary to try to figure that out.
It could be a reduction in number of races run per day. If you look at a lot of the European tracks, they'll run 6 or 7 races a day and that's it. So it's certainly something to look at. But our model is a little different than the rest of the world. The racetracks in the United States make their money off of handle, where the rest of the world, they tend to make their money off of hospitality and attendance. Mm-hmm. So for us, we always want to generate as much handle as possible. And usually you do that through more racing. That said, there are times when we've cut back the number of races on a card and actually handled more money. So at this upcoming Belmont meet, because of the hockey arena being built at Belmont Park, we are going to run 8 races on weekdays. And so that'll be an interesting experiment just to see, hey, we're running less races on weekdays. What does that do to our handle?
And the greatest thing that'll happen there, one of the greatest things that'll happen, the Islanders make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and you have the Belmont in the afternoon, the Stanley Cup Championship that night.
I don't know where we'll park everybody, but yeah, that would be a pretty interesting event, especially for NBC, I assume. Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to getting the Islanders on the property and getting, Belmont rebuilt, not only with a new arena, but also a new Belmont Park for our fans. It's been, I think that track was built in 1958 or remodeled in 58. And so it's been a while since there's been an upgrade. So we're looking forward to the next few years to make some changes there.
Martin Panza, not only the Senior VP of Racing Operations at New York Racing Association, been on the Graded Stakes Committee, the Breeders' Cup Selection Committee. As we said earlier, quite an innovator. And you touched on the problems that they had at Santa Anita. That's been well documented. We know about that. And the Breeders' Cup is going to still stay at Santa Anita. They decided that with unanimous vote. A situation I thought was good to not give up on one of the marquee tracks is kind of a vote of confidence, in my opinion, Marty.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was very important that the Breeders' Cup stayed at Santa Anita. Listen, it's a gorgeous facility. It's been there for many years. I mean, it's the great race place. I think they went through a difficult winter. I think, they had 16 inches of rain and they ran 19 additional races. They just, the track man who'd been there for many years had left. A lot of things just aligned. And when you get into situations like that, you want to slow it down as quickly as possible and react as quickly as possible. And if anything, if you look at the bright side of what's coming out of this, I think, most of the major tracks, we're all working together now. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more safety rules that are being put in place. And I think it's a great thing that Breeders' Cup supported Santa Anita because we need California horse racing as a country, and we need Santa Anita and Del Mar to thrive. And it's important that, we do whatever we can on the East Coast to support the West Coast and vice versa. We all need each other in this industry. And so I applaud what the Breeders' Cup board did because it was, probably a difficult decision for them, but I think it was the right one.
Do you ever fly over like I do when you're coming into LAX and look down at what used to be Hollywood Park and get a little sentimental? I do. That was the first track I went to in California was Hollywood Park years ago.
Yeah, I worked there for 23 years, and I actually went over there about 6 months ago. It's not the easiest thing to see. If you think about it, I think in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Hollywood Park led the country for like 20-something years in a row in handle, attendance, and purses. And to think that it's gone, it's just a sad situation. But it got to a point where the land was so valuable, and we just weren't generating enough, positive revenue that unfortunately it's gone. And that's why it's important for us to really support places like Santa Anita because we need those places to stay as racetracks.
I had my picture taken in front of the Cary Grant Pavilion when I was at Hollywood Park years ago. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting place. I mean, Marge Everett built the Cary Grant Pavilion, and it was a great racetrack. I mean, it was on the west side of town in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of wealth on the coast there, and it would run in the summers and Friday nights, and Mr. Hubbard came in there and really tried to revitalize it, and Churchill Downs came in and tried to make a go of it, and we'll miss it. I mean, it was a special place, certainly.
Martin Panza is a legend among any gambler out there. Anybody I know, and that's most of them, that's ever placed a bet because you created the first guarantee, that Pick Six $1 million guarantee, I believe, around 1998.
Yeah, that was interesting. We kicked that back and forth for about a year at Hollywood Park, and Keith Champlin was with the NYRA, was working at Hollywood Park at the time as director of marketing. And I remember one Friday night we we were like, you know what, we need to do this. And we went to Mr. Hubbard and we said, listen, we have this idea. Can we try it? And first time we did it, I think we guaranteed it for $1 million, and I think we handled about $3.2 million. And Hubbard was actually out of town that day. And he came back a couple days later and he's like, hey, we're going to do this again in about 2 weeks. So I think we did it like 3 times that meet. And certainly it got copied by everyone and as it ran its course. But it worked and it was interesting. I remember the excitement that day at the racetrack was just tremendous.
I remember hearing about it and I said, this is impossible. They're guaranteeing it. This cannot be. And, I think a lot of us that ever made a bet thought this is a great thing. This is, you reinvented the wheel when you came up with this, Martin.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And at the time it made a lot of sense. And, I'm sort of sad to see where the pick six has gone these days. I'm a big believer in sort of the $2 pick six. And NYRA was one of the last tracks to do away with it, and we're actually working to try and bring it back. We've got the jackpot pick six, but we're also working to bring back the traditional pick six as well.
I think that's important. I think that's certainly one thing. We talk about moving forward and innovation, everything. That's one thing I would still embrace 30 years later, 20 years later, is the $2 pick six.
I think a lot of people just grew up with it, and
Yeah.
I guess it started down in Caliente. It used to be the 510. And then Marge Everett brought it up to the States. And I think just, a lot of old time racing fans, they grew up with the pick six and that's what they knew. And there's a lot of players. I think it's just a different group of players from what's playing the jackpot pick sixes right now. So we are looking at ways to try and bring it back. And you got to keep doing that. You have to keep evolving with your wagers and evolving with your races if you can, because the world is changing quickly through technology, and we need to change with it whenever we see an opportunity.
And with sports wagering now, some states have started it. I guess Jersey, you can go over there and make sports bets now in Jersey. I believe I am right on that. I just got back from Vegas last week, which we know you could always do that in Nevada for years. Is that going to change horse racing? Does it kind of help it? Will more people get involved in gambling and start looking at horse racing that may have only looked at football and basketball, but they go out there to make a bet on a football game and they go, hey, there's a horse race up there. I can bet on that. I just don't know what the answer would be. I'd like your insight.
Well, I think like in the case of Monmouth Park in New Jersey, it's at a bricks and mortar location. And so it's certainly brought people out to the racetrack, and it's maybe brought a different clientele out to the racetrack. And then that clientele is betting the races as well. So I think it's a positive on that end. We'd love in New York to try and get it where, at least our racetracks can offer it so that we do get some bricks and mortar play back and forth. And then if it's going to go onto the internet and through mobile devices or through computers, then it's important that racing get attached to that website so that if someone wants to play a football game or a baseball game, there's also the ability for them to play horse racing off of that website. So, it's a change, and it needs to adapt to it, and we need to be part of it if we can. And I know in New York, we're working very closely to try and make sure that happens.
I remember the days when they put the padlock on the payphone before the race.
Yeah, I remember the old days. I grew up, jumping the fence and going into Santa Anita, and I remember all the rows of payphones, and they would lock them up before post time, and no cell phones back then. So different time, and technology continues to move forward, and racing needs to go with it. And I think in New York, we've done a very good job. Tony Alivato's done a great job from a TV standpoint and putting us on the TV as much as possible. And NYRA Bets, we keep trying to move that platform forward to allow people to bet, through the phone or through their computers. And you just have to keep evolving. And I think racing, Churchill Downs, Stronach Group, NYRA, Del Mar, Oakland, I think we're all sort of moving in unison to try and work together to create new platforms to make it easier for fans and to continue to try to grow our sport.
A young Martin Panza jumping the fence at Santa Anita. I imagine you thought possibly you were going to have a career in horse racing in some capacity.
I didn't really know at the time. Basically, high school, I had some friends' parents who owned horses, and truthfully, we probably snuck to the track every day. We had it worked out that if you won at lunchtime, you could bet the first, and you couldn't see the second. So if you played the double, you had to wait till after sixth period to figure out if you hit the double or not. But we had a lot of fun every weekend. Santa Anita was packed, and we were trying to figure out whose parents weren't going that weekend so we could use their box. And, it was a lot of good memories. Had a good group of friends that, we just loved going to the races every weekend and didn't really think about ever working there. And then when I got through college, I sort of said, you know what, I really like racing and it's something I want to get into. And my father had always said, look, you're going to have to work for the rest of your life, do something that you love. And I just made my way to the track.
And done it well. I mean, really, I mean that you're one of really the innovators in the sport. You talked about the sport kind of coming more together with everything that happened at Santa Anita. Do you think there's a need, or do you think it could ever happen that there would be an actual racing commissioner or some semblance of an actual board that would be over all of racing, that New York and Kentucky and Arkansas and Florida and California and all in between could agree on that, okay, we've got a committee that will be in charge, if not an actual commissioner?
It's a difficult question, and it's something that's been kicked around, obviously, for the last 2 or 3 decades. And, it's difficult for racing because we operate in 38 different states, and they've all got, state regulators. Unfortunately, a lot of them have different rules. And then you've got racetrack companies that, some are publicly traded companies and some are privately owned. And it's difficult because we're not like an NFL or a Major League Baseball where everything is pooled together and monies go back to each team. So it's difficult to see if there could be an office that maybe, is like the NFL commissioner's office or Major League Baseball's, president. But I think there can be an office that can take care of, say, the integrity of racing, where the rules are uniform and there's somebody nationally making sure that everybody is adhering to those rules and that we're all on the same line, whether it's a medication rule or whether it's a safety rule on the racetrack. And I believe that we're working as an industry to try and come up with some sort of plan to lead us in that direction, where at least from the administration of races run, it would be under the same rules, whether it's medication or safety. And I think that's probably a good starting point. And if we can start to work together to get our stakes races better aligned so we're not running the same stakes on the same day, you can start to see where the sport can move forward. And I think, like I said earlier, with what happened at Santa Anita earlier this year, if there's a bright ray of sunshine coming out of that, this is it, that we are talking and the big tracks are working together and we are trying to move the ball forward. Earlier in the year, we announced a LASIX initiative with Churchill, Stronach, NYRA, Oaklawn, Del Mar, Tampa Bay, a few other tracks where starting next year, 2020, we wouldn't use LASIX in 2-year-old races, and in 2021, we wouldn't use it in any of our stakes. And that was solely because of what was going on at Santa Anita and the ability for the racetracks to get on the phone and talk to each other and say, guys, we need to make some changes. We need to work together and move forward. So in a long-winded answer to your original question, I think there is room for some sort of a national sort of movement forward where there is somebody overlooking at least the administration of racing.
That was not a long-winded answer, by the way. Everything made total sense. And I don't, you know what? It's not a situation where I don't think anybody could sum it up in 10 seconds. Like you say, there's too many in play here, too many states, too many racing associations, and, a lot of powerful people. Let's face it, a lot of people that's pretty powerful that have their own opinions about things. So, no, I think that was perfect what you said. And I would make you commissioner if it was up to me. And I don't know you that well. You've always been nice every time we run into each other. But I'd make you because I'd still go back to that guaranteed pick 6, Martin, back in 1998. I think that's one of the greatest moves in racing in a long time.
Yeah, it's I appreciate that. Look, you always have to try and think outside of the box, and I think if you have the ability or the opportunity to travel around the world to different racetracks, and I've been fortunate in life to be able to do that. A lot of times you can just see what other people are doing, and if it's a good idea in Japan, it might be a good idea in the United States, or if it's a good idea in Germany, it might work here. And the more you can see, sometimes it gives you a better perspective on, you know what, we should do that too. We should copy that idea. I think it can work here. And, I just, like I said earlier, I mean, I think we've got a lot of really good things going for us. Purses have never been better at a lot of racetracks. You take an Arlington Park that we thought, might go the way of Hollywood Park, and it looks like it's going to be saved.
Right.
These are all really positive things. And I think the laws of supply and demand, right now there's a great demand for good horses, and there's not enough of them. And at some point, that supply will have to start picking up again. And with the tax incentives that are given, I think a lot of people can start to get in the game and play it, 60 cents on the dollar. And with the purse levels that they're at, you have the ability to, I'd say make money, but at the very least maybe break even. And really, it's not about that. It's about the experience you get. A horse can take you to Dubai, it can take you to Hong Kong, it can take you to Royal Ascot, it can take you to the Kentucky Derby, it can take you to Belmont Stakes or Saratoga. There's so many great experiences in racing, and that's what we need to sell to people, that, hey, come be part of this. This is a lot of fun. Bring your friends with you. It's a great social activity, and we've got a lot of good things to sell.
And Saratoga is still one of the most fun social places I've ever been in racing. I don't know. You've been to a lot more tracks around the world, but I don't know if you can beat Saratoga.
No, it really is. I mean, the track itself, there's just so much character at the track, and the barn area in the morning, going through the stables, it's awesome. And the town just embraces racing so much. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this a long time, and probably, one of the greatest days in racing for me was the morning that Baffert galloped American Pharoah, and 20,000 people came out that morning at like 7:30 in the morning. I remember Bob and I were staying in a winter circle just going, holy cow. And, it's just when you see things like that, you realize just how special this place is. And, they tell a story, he got beat, and I had made him a reservation at the Wishing Well, a restaurant up here. And I thought after he got beat, I had to sort of force my way in to get him a reservation for 12 on a Saturday night. And I thought, he's not going to go, and that guy's going to be upset with me. And I guess Baffert walked in and gave him a standing ovation.
Oh, yeah.
And, that is really cool. It just says a lot about Saratoga and the people up here.
I don't think there's a more, I'm not going to start debating all the other tracks and everything. I don't think there's a more knowledgeable fan base that regularly attends a track than that does the Saratoga meet, in my opinion. They're great fans. They're knowledgeable fans. And then, you got all New England coming in, and, of course, upstate New York's a beautiful place this time of year. And I was there. I remember the first time I was at Saratoga, Martin, after a meet, I didn't realize you could walk in almost any restaurant. I thought you had to wait 2 hours at every restaurant. And then I went up there, my dad and I were at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we drove over from Cooperstown. I wanted him to see the track, and I said, this is amazing. I can actually walk in and get a seat. It's not during race time.
Yeah, no, it really is just a great town. I mean, I've spent time at Del Mar certainly for several years, and then now at Saratoga for the last 6, and they're both special in their own way. But this place, it's really magical, and we're fortunate business continues to grow for us up here. And we just try to keep moving the ball forward and trying to do the right things, working with the community, and continue to try and grow racing up here. Obviously, this week we went to a 5-day race schedule during this meet, and some of that had to do with the construction down at Belmont, and some of it probably had to do with just the horse population in general. But the town has accepted it, and I think the horsemen and the employees certainly getting those 2 days off have helped. But it's a great place up here. And, I know purses are bigger at other tracks, but I tell you what, if you're an owner, there's nothing better than winning a race up at Saratoga.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll be at Belmont next week, right? Yeah, next week for NBC.
Yeah, next Saturday is the last legs of our Turf Triple Crown this year, the Jockey Club Derby and Jockey Club Oaks. And knock on wood, right now the fields look pretty good. And it'll be interesting because we've got 3-year-olds running a mile and a half on the turf, and the fillies, 3-year-old fillies, a mile and 3/8 on the turf, and these are long races for American horses, and it's the first year we've done it. But so far, I'm happy with the 6 races that we've run, or the 4 we've run, and the 2 that are coming up. And I read the blogs and I read Park Report and everything else, and when we put it out there, everyone's like, well, just give the money to Chad Brown. And so far, while he's been competitive, he hasn't won them yet. And I probably just jinxed myself, and I'll probably win the next 2. But these are tough races, and it's not that easy. And I think unfortunately, Concrete Rose getting injured.
Yeah.
Rusty Arnold, she's a really special filly, and I just think that this whole turf thing, it was a good move by NYRA to do, and I think there's a bright future for it. And we look forward to next Saturday at Belmont, getting back down to New York City and getting to Belmont will be underway.
Yet another thing that one of the most innovative persons in all of racing does, and that's create this Triple Crown. You can see it on NBC next week. We'll talk more about that next week on this show. Meanwhile, Martin, I really appreciate your time and the insight on an array of subjects that we've been able to cover, but I knew you would know something about all of them, so thank you.
No, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll do it again. Thank you. Martin Panza joining us here on the Horse Racing Show. We'll have more when we come back. Thank you.